Good morning. I am Jeevani Sirivardhana, Director General of the Sri Lanka Export Development Board. On behalf of the Sri Lanka Export Development Board, I wish to welcome all of you, the participants at today's webinar, and the resource persons who are assisting us in conducting this webinar. The recent COVID-19 pandemic has had a serious impact on the foreign exchange earnings of the country, that is, on tourism, remittances, and even on exports. In this situation, it became necessary for the government to restrict non-essential imports coming into the country. Despite the situation, however, the government policy was to permit raw material imports which are necessary for the export industries. However, this gave rise to many issues which are the subject for discussion at this webinar today. So let me introduce the resource persons of the webinar today who will explain to you first about these restrictions and assist you in addressing the issues that has arisen. I would firstly like to introduce our keynote speaker, Mrs. Damayanti Karunaratne, the Controller General of the Import-Export Control Department, under whose purview this gazette was published. She is a senior SLAS officer who joined the SLAS in 1995 and has worked in many government institutions, including the Mahaweli Authority and the provincial health authorities. We were fortunate to have had a very close relationship with her, the Sri Lanka Export Development Board, when she functioned as our own additional secretary of our ministry. So thank you, madam, for joining us, assisted by Mr. Ranjit Wimalasurya, the Control of Import-Export Control, and Mr. Kasun Fernando, of Assistant Director of the same department, will be joining her. Then the other most important institution, of course, is the Sri Lanka Customs. We are thankful to the Director General Customs for nominating two senior officials, Mr. Gamini Jayawardena, the Director Customs, and Mr. Tilak Amarapperuma Arachi, Deputy Director of Customs. As much as the Sri Lanka Customs, the BOI also carries out similar functions with regard to the BOI enterprises. And we have with us today Mr. Uday Vijayagunatilaka and Mr. Mahinda Ramanayaka, both Executive Directors of the BOI, joining us for this webinar. So with that brief introduction, may I now hand over the session to Mrs. Damayanti Karunaratne to give an introduction to this gazette and explain the implementation of same. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Jeevani. Today, at first, I'm going to give a brief introduction about the few gazette notification. At first, there was a big challenge to face that ongoing health crisis and its economic fallout. Therefore, there was a big challenge and urgent need to do something by the government that due to the COVID epidemic, at first the government identified to reduce the exchange rate. It was the most needful thing. Therefore, the banking instruction was issued by central government, and parallelly, the Import and Export Control Department also issued the banking instruction to controlling some non-essential items. So after that, according to the government guidelines and instructions, Import and Export Control Department was identified some non-essential items which could be reduced exchange rate. So we the next Gazette notification was issued by IECD on April 16th of April, mentioning few items. I think it is not few actually. It was the biggest gazette we have ever published. It is very different to our normal gazette notification because there was two schedules. One schedule was the first schedule was about temporary suspended items, which suspended for 3 months from the 16th of April. Then second schedule was the credit list. That means the importer could have import that items with the 3 months, 90 days credit period. That is the main purpose, the issuing that gazette notification. But later on, we identified some more purposes because we should have, with the economic crisis, we should have protect our local industries and local farmers and the environment of Sri Lanka. So with those purposes, we decided there was some issues. The request made from business sector, some through the BOI, EDB, and chambers. There were many issues have been submitted. Then the president appointed committee was there. The committee decided to consider their grievances, and the second gazette notification was issued by ICD on 21st of May. So there is the history of gazette notification and purposes of the issuing that guidelines. So I'd like to invite our controller, Mr. Ranjit Simalasurya, to explain further about this matter.
Thank you very much. Good morning to all of you, and thank you very much EDB for organizing this the webinar to educate the stakeholders regarding this new gazette notifications and regulations. And it was we also had an idea of having these kind of few webinars to familiarize the new regulations among the people, but due to the busyness in the department and the lack of the officers in the office, we were unable to organize. So anyway, thank you very much, the EDB, for making this effort. And as the Controller General explained, the main purpose of introducing this the regulations by the government is the protecting the economy of the country. So you know, as the citizens of this country, so all the income sources the country had were reduced. That means they were blocked or were interrupted due to the corona pandemic situation. So mainly we had the main income of foreign employment. Now you can see the situation of earning money through the foreign employment. Now we have to maintain those people who are coming back from their the working places, and the country is now looking after them. So we lost that source. And the second one is the garment industry. You know, everybody can see the situation there. And the third one was the tourism. and even that has been the income through the tourism has been decreased drastically. So to protect the economy of the country, so we have to control the outward remittance. So main purpose of introducing this new regulation is controlling the outward remittance by restricting some items to be imported, and at the same time the government had an idea of promoting the local manufacturing sector. For initiating this at the beginning, so the country was locked down on 16th of March this year. On 19th of March, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka issued a ruling to the bankers not to facilitate importing some items, non-essential items, through the banks. So that was the beginning of that. Within a couple of days, this department issued another direction to the bankers to protect or to control some items, making payments for some items which are not essential for the economy of the country. And this attempt was regularized by 16th of April by publishing a gazette notification with 2 schedules with temporarily suspended items and items to be imported with a credit facility for 90 days. Then it was amended by 22nd of May with identifying the difficulties faced by the importers and the local market and the public of this country. So that was amended on 22nd of May. With that gazette notification, the main idea was again considered. Most of the items in Schedule A, which are restricted to be imported, have been identified as non-essential. So we can survive without most of these items. Especially, some of these items can be produced locally. So when we controlling those items, we give the opportunity to the people and the sectors in the country to promote their business and promote their initiatives to develop that the industries. So by the gazette notification, if I concentrate on the exporters who are dealing with EDB, so there may be some difficulties faced by the individuals through introducing this gazette notification. But if you think as the country, so we have to, especially the government has to think of the country's economy. In that perspective, there may be some reject or some the positive decisions have to be made. Therefore, we have given an opportunity to the exporters by regulation number 4 of the gazette notification. So they have been exempted if they can prove that their product is with 20% value addition, so they can do their business irrespectively the condition of this gazette notification. These the regulations are exempted for the exporters who have 20% of value addition of their products. So that is the one of the main feature of this gazette notification, and there may be some other issues faced by the problems faced by the importers, exporters, and some other people, there's a special condition or provision in this gazette notification to consider all these grievances. In section number 17 or the provision number 17 of the gazette notification, special committee is there, Committee of Trade and Custom Based Taxation. So all the grievances or the appeal made by the exporters, importers, and other people, they can submit their appeals or the requests to that committee, which is summoned every week, and the final decision is made by the committee. So as I mentioned, there may be some difficulties faced by the individuals, but considering the country's economy and considering their own grievances, the committee will make favorable decisions. So I think I don't need to explain each and every point in the gazette notification, which is available in our website and some other sources. Anybody can go through the document. There's no point of describing each and every point. The main features which I can highlight regarding the export and exporters are these two factors. If the viewers or the listeners have any kind of clarification, we can do that at the time of Q&A session. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Mrs. Damayanti Karunaratne and Mr. Ranjit Wimalasuriya for giving an overview of these recent gazette notifications. Before we go on to the question and answers, I think we could have a similar clarification from the Sri Lanka Customs. And may I now invite Mr. Gamini Jayawardena and Mr. Tilak Amarapperuma Arachi to take over from now.
Thank you. I'm Gamini Jayawardena, Director of Customs. Actually, I will handle the part where local consumed goods are imported. Tilak will attend to the importations where raw material and other things are imported for export purposes. Now, because of these two gazettes, the Customs Department is facing a lot of questions and we have to answer them. Now, the first gazette that was issued on April 16th restricted several communities for 3 months. At the same time, brought some communities under 3 months credit. So we had to allow importers to clear their shipments based on the provisions available in these gazettes. Now, if you look at the second gazette that was issued on May 22nd, the temporary suspended list has been enhanced. At the same time, the credit list has also been enhanced. Now, some items which were in the temporary suspended list in the first gazette have been brought under credit list in the second gazette. So there are so many similar situations. Now, as customs, what we have to do is to facilitate the clearance of cargo smoothly, so that with consultation with the Controller General of Imports and Exports, we have formulated some scheme to accommodate most of the problematic areas. For example, there are importers who have opened the letter of trade prior to these gazettes, and some have made advance payments, and some have placed orders to collect the cargo on DPO DA terms. So now actually until the second gazette was issued on May 22nd. So we were able to facilitate the clearance of most of the cargo that were imported into the country. But I must say that there are some instances, some importers, normally they import the item, even the item is under temporary suspended list in both gazettes. For example, a particular item in the TS list in the first gazette is also available in the second gazette. But some importers, they don't take much, concern about this gazette notification, and they tend to import what they want on open account basis, basically. So these things, of course, we are not facilitating, and we have imposed some penalty and other penalties and release those goods with the concurrence of the Controller General. At the moment, we have formulated a working committee within the department to discuss issues relating to these restricted list published by the Import Control Department. Now, the best, my advice for the importers is to write to us with your appeal when you are facing a problem, and then we will discuss it within our committee, which is headed by the Director General. If the committee is able to take a decision, then we will release the goods as we decide. Otherwise, we will take that matter to the committee which is held at the Presidential Secretariat. So, for example, and if I go into the history of these restrictions, the first restriction was introduced by the central bank by a directive issued to the government, commercial banks on March 19, where central bank restricted the importation of certain categories of vehicles and also certain kind of electrical items and some other commodities. So the central bank regulation was for 3 months. So the import controller's second gazette issued on April 22nd has brought all these items restricted by the central bank under temporary suspended list. For example, if I take an example, the vehicles were restricted for 3 months by the central bank, and it has been brought under TS list, temporary suspension list of May 22nd gazette. So now yesterday there was a speculation because the central bank deadline was to be expired today, because 3 months has already gone from March. By today it is 3 months gone, but because of this latest gazette, it is again extended for another 1 month, because the import control gazette is effective from April 16. So from that date, we take 3 months for vehicle imports restriction. And also I have to tell you about this there are some issues regarding imports made by various industrialists for the local consumption, because they import raw materials for manufacturing various commodities locally and not for export. So now we have devised a method with the help of Ministry of Industries, where a certification is given by the Ministry of Industries to the value addition exceeding 35%. Of course, then we permit the import of goods even though they are under Schedule 102 without any restriction. That is for the encouragement of local industries. Now, my advice for the importers is to consult us if they are having any problem, because most of the issues now we have identified. For example, for the goods which are coming under Schedule 1 of the second gazette, there are importers who have opened letter of credit before May 21st, and some have paid advance payment. And some goods which are under credit list in the second gazette, importers have ordered on DP terms. So it should be on credit terms. So we let them change the mode of payment, payment term, to 108 days credit or whatever as required by the Gazette. If not, we have to take a decision. So the committee will be taking a fair decision, listening to all the grievances of this importer. If we are unable to take any decision, then we will pass that matter to the committee at President Office. So my request is, if you have any query, please consult myself or any other committee member, especially myself or director attached to the loan room, the Directoration Division, or Mr. Arma Perumarachi. In case of air cargo, they can consult Mr. Malik Perera, Deputy Director there. So they will try to sort it out there itself. Otherwise, they will forward these matters to the committee. The committee will attend to all your questions. With regard to the export-oriented imports, I will hand over my speech to Tilak. Thank you.
Good morning. Can you all hear me? Hello? Hello?
Tilak, I can hear.
Yeah.
Okay.
Carry on.
Right.
Continue.
Okay. Okay. Now, since the philosophy or the rationale behind the regulations are explained by the Import and Export Control Department, and my colleague, Mr. Javardhan, explained the impact of the regulations on imports for home use, then I will go through the procedure or how these regulations are implemented in respect of imports for export purposes, import for re-export purposes. Basically, I will cover the customs side of it. And as Mr. Ramanayak is there, I expect him to cover the import for re-export purposes and other areas such as investment projects, flagship projects under the regulations, which are operated or implemented under the BOI regulations. So the main characteristics of this temporary suspension regulation is to discourage import of non-essential goods and encouraging local production, as correctly pointed out by the Import and Export Control Department. Now, when you import for re-export, see these restrictions under the regulation is very much relaxed. For example, subject to conditions, the first condition is you need to achieve 20% value addition, the minimum value addition of 20%. Then you have to ensure, the exporter has to ensure the repatriation of export earnings within 60 days. Under such, when you fulfill such conditions, you are free to import your raw materials. And when it comes to imports on NFE or no foreign exchange involved basis, or when you are importing on your export earnings, the entire application of this regulation will not be, the whole regulation will be not ineffective. You are free from the regulations. Then when you are importing for local industries, as Mr. Javardhan pointed out, you need to achieve value addition over the 35%. And when the raw material is not locally available, and also on credit terms within 30 to 60 days. Okay, let me see how it is when you are importing raw material on NFE or export earning basis. This is covered by Regulation 5 of the Gazette of 22nd May 2020. So when you are importing on no foreign exchange involved basis, or when you are importing using funds of your foreign buyers, so there are instances where you have to import raw materials, but either you can import them on NFE basis, or you can get your buyer to purchase them and send it to you. Or otherwise, you also can make use of your deposits in your local banks, in your bank account, where your export earnings are accrued to. So you can basically use your export earnings to finance your imports. So in such situations, you are not covered by this gazette. You are free to import your, remember, raw materials. So under Regulation 6, However, you are required to disclose, the import is required to disclose the source of funds to the commercial banks when the import is under these terms. You know, when you are importing under Regulation 5, that means NFE and using funds of foreign buyers, and when you are using your export earnings, you are supposed to disclose your source of funds to the commercial banks. To facilitate customs clearance, we expect commercial banks to endorse on the invoice the payment terms. You know, this payment term information is necessary when you are making customs declaration. If you look at page 28 of the customs declaration, you are supposed to enter the terms of payment. Now, unlike in the past, NFE involved, again, no foreign exchange involved basis imports, you don't have to go to bank, you know, you did not go to bank. But now under these regulations, you need to go to your bank and get the endorsement on the bank saying that the transaction is, or the import is on no foreign exchange involved basis. Then when you are importing on value addition basis, that means Regulation 4, this is applicable till 15th July 2020. That means 90 days from 16th April 2020. And it allows all items, including Schedule 1 and Schedule 2. So when you're importing for re-export purposes on value addition basis, you can import almost any item, including Schedule 1 and Schedule 2. And it permits all type of payments. So when importing raw material, you are required to achieve raw material to process or manufacture of export products with value addition over 20%. So you need to achieve this 20% value addition in respect to what you import. So when you import plant, machinery and equipment under this scheme, you need to ensure that the product that you manufacture using this machinery achieve 20% of the value addition. Then again, you are required, the export is required to ensure that export earnings are repatriated back into the country, into his bank account within 60 days from the date of export. So when you, now importer is required. So when you are importing under this scheme, import is required to give a certificate to the bank and the customs in respect of required value addition and repatriation of export earnings within 60 days. Well, in order to facilitate this, we have a template made available at this directorate. I think it is published in the website also, so that you can declare your value addition and in the same format which is applicable for all the importers under the scheme. So basically, this is it when it comes to imports under under Customs, Industries and Services Directorate for re-export purposes. So when you have questions, we will go into specific issues. Thank you.
Okay. I would now like to invite the representatives from the Board of Investment to speak a few words. Mr. Vijay Gunatilaka and Mr. Ramanayaka, would you like to add on?
Good morning to everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear.
Okay, fine. So let me thank again to EDB for organizing this very important webinar for the benefit of the exporters and also the local importers. So I think most of the speakers explained very well, emphasize more important aspects of the Gazette notification. And Mr. Tilak especially explained about the exporters side to how this regulation is applicable for exporters. But let me explain few most important points which raised by the BOI companies during last few weeks. So in this new Gazette notification, so there are 170 HS headings mentioned in the Schedule 1. So HS heading, not HS codes, HS heading, 170 HS headings are included in Schedule 1, which are falling under the temporary suspension. And there are 134 HS headings falling under the credit basis. So therefore, so I think everybody is clear now with regard to the clause number 4 and 5, with what Mr. Tilak very clearly explained, relevant to the exporters. So let me explain about again, just to highlight the clause number 4. It says that any item imported by the exporters. So all the item, maybe raw material, machinery, any item required by the exporters for manufacturing and export in this clause, so they have to fulfill 2 requirements. So what are the 2 requirements? Number 1 is 20% of value addition, which BOI has already submitted to customs. So customs is handling that part even for BOI company at present. So Sri Lanka Customs has been entrusted to do this. So therefore, so every BOI company, you should go to the custom at the last point to BCD unit, BOI custom coordination unit. So they go to that unit and get their approval for the clearance. So when they go there, so if it is coming under clause 4, under the clause 4, so any item imported under 6 payment terms. So at present, everybody knows that there are 7 payment terms with regard to import. So the 6 payment term is included in clause number 4. Right? If they import it under this payment terms, so exporters have to fulfill 2 requirements. Number 1 is 20% value addition. BOI has already submitted the list of the companies who have fulfilled this 20% value addition. Therefore, you should not worry about that. We have already submitted. So what is your commitment? You have to submit the undertaking to Sri Lanka Customs that you will bring the export proceeds to Sri Lanka within 60 days. So under that clause number 4, you can import your cargo without any problem. So then when we discuss about clause number 5, so this is with regard to raw material imports. But if any export-oriented company is going to import raw material, so you can import it under 3 conditions. So I think Mr. Tilak clearly explained about the 3 conditions. First one and second one is NFE. NFE basis. NFE basis, there are 2 ways. One is if your parent company is going to send it on NFE, so we consider it as NFE. The second one, sometime your buyers will pay for your suppliers. So buyers from USA and settle the import bill of the Chinese supplier. So then that is also NFE to Sri Lanka. So then if you import it on NFE basis, so there's no any restriction under this. The last point under clause 5, if any exporter is going to make the settlement from their FCBU account with their positive balance of the export proceeds, so you don't have any problem. So the import of raw material on NFE or settlement from your FCBU account. So then you are very comfortable. So those are the few things that I have to highlight with regard to this regulation, but we got some complaints from the investors with regard to the bank. So when they go to the bank does not allow to open their LC and all. So I think we can sort out from by case. If you have any problem, you can bring it to our notice. So Sri Lanka Customs has very cordially helped us to sort out these issues. So if you have any issue with regard to the payment terms, so you can bring it to our notice. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you to BOI. Yes, I think now the formal sessions are over. We can take on the questions and provide the answers for some of them. We have got several questions, but in general is one question that I could respond. And also I would like to emphasize that these suspensions, these notifications are only temporary. It is only a temporary measure of restricting imports of non-essential goods in order to curtail in order, because of the foreign currency issues that we are now facing with. Even if you look at the exports during the month of April this year has dropped drastically to around $300 million compared to the same period in 2019, which was around $770 million. So you see the export earnings also has dropped from over 700 to nearly 300 million in the month of April. But of course, the good thing is that in May, we see an increase. And overall, from January to May, exports this year has dropped by 1/3 to what our exports from January to April was in 2019. So it is for these reasons, the lack of foreign exchange, that these measures have been brought in only as a temporary measure. And there was a general question as to how the appeals could be made. Yeah, we have so many questions, but in general, if any exporter or importer has any issue due to the implementation of these gazettes, they can be submitted through either the EDB or the BOI or directly to the Controller General Import-Export Control. As was said, there is a committee called the Tariff Determination Committee, which is chaired by the Secretary to HE, the President, which meets almost every week, and that looks into about the implementation and any issues. So if any one exporter or importer has an issue, they can make a formal submission through any member of this committee. Some of the members are, as I said, the BOI, EDB, Ministry of Industries. You can address your issue to the Secretary, Ministry of Industries, or directly to the Presidential Secretariat, to the Secretary of the Tariff Determination Committee of the Presidential Secretariat. And then those will be tabled for committee's consideration. And there was another question asked on the approvals required at this stage. We have been advised by the Presidential Secretariat that to minimize obtaining approvals. So when the restricted items are to be imported, you have to follow the guidelines that are made that are public, and you only need to go to the bank and to the Sri Lanka Customs. So there are no other approvals per se that is required. So to take on the other questions, I will time permitting, we will try to take as many questions as we can by the respective organizations. But the remaining questions, please be assured that the EDB will get the responses from the respective organizations and respond to you. So to start with, may I invite the Import-Export Control Department to respond to some of the issues with regard to the one common question is, when is this temporary suspension going to be lifted? And what are essential goods and what are these so-called non-essential goods? And there were questions on the open account and LCs being opened, coinciding with the implementation of these gazettes, and how does the value addition computed? I think it was already answered by the BOI now, but nevertheless, I'll hand over to the Department of Import-Export Control to take on the first questions.
About non-essential items and actually agricultural products have been included, and those items can be produced locally. Therefore, such items, importation of such items is non-essential. And the other things are some finished products like shoes, hats, clothes, like that. Those items are also unnecessary, importation of unnecessary, because locally they can be produced. And plastic items, if we look at value of importation of plastic items last year. The amount is huge. Therefore, since this gazette is effective for 3 months at present, therefore, that importation of plastic items also non-essential at this point. I think I answered it. Another thing is value addition. At value addition, importers has to be made a declaration to the customs and bank about their value addition, and after that they can release documents and clear goods. For that purpose, we have import control department already has issued operating instructions to implement that directions to banks and the custom. I think I answered that question. Any other questions?
Jeevani, do you need any clarification regarding this the question?
Yeah, no, actually the questions are listed there. There are about 60 odd questions. I hope you have gone through them. And one is whether entrepreneur trade is permitted under this, and how does the entrepreneur trade function under these restrictions, and about the open account. Is open account stopped? So maybe if Import-Export Control Department can respond to the question on the open account operations, and how the value addition is computed. Maybe Sri Lanka Customs did answer how is the value addition computed. Is that the company has to submit the declaration?
Yeah, when it comes to imports for re-export purposes, the company is required to give a certificate to bank and customs on the value addition and confirming that export earnings are brought back to the country within 60 days. So value addition has to be certified by the importer. So for customs purposes, we have a template, because the value addition is not yet, the formula is not yet confirmed or publicized. So at the moment, we simply calculate the net gain to the country. We calculate it on the basis of, we get the FOB value of the export product, and we deduct from that the total value of inputs used in the production of that export product. Then that difference is divided by the total inputs, the value of total inputs. So which is the total, the rate of total gain out of that export production. So when you multiply that by 100, you get the percentage. At the moment, this is the formula we used for import for re-export purposes, which is very simple. Then once that formula is publicized and agreed upon, so we will go into it. Otherwise, without this formula, we wouldn't have been able to facilitate imports during these past few days. Thank you. And can I comment on the entrepot trade also?
Yes.
Now, entrepot trade is also, I believe, falling within Regulation 4 of the Gazette, where you need to have value addition over 20% and the export earnings to be brought back into the country within 60 days. But there are situations where you may not reach 20% value addition in respect of entrepot trade, which is not practical. We have received certain inquiries like that, and we have forwarded that to the trade and the technical committee under the purview of secretary to His Excellency the President through Director General of Customs. So they are under review. Most likely within a couple of days we will get the input in this direction. That is the entrepot trade. Thank you.
Yeah, and there was some questions on no foreign exchange, whether they can bring in goods to Sri Lanka supplied by their foreign partners, yes, that is encouraged to bring in goods to Sri Lanka without having to commit for foreign exchange. The whole purpose is that we don't pay out foreign exchange from the country, and to defer such payments as much as possible, maybe for 90 days or 180 or as much as possible. That is what is required. Any other questions? The controller, Import-Export Control Department would like to respond on the date on which, as of present, when this will be lifted, the restrictions. There were a couple of questions on that. Can we give an answer to that? Questions?
Firstly, I would like to answer the question about the open account. The open account payment term has been reinstated, re-established by the Gazette Notification 22 May 2020. Therefore, now any importer can import and clear goods under the open account. Second question is when the Gazette Notification regulation are lifted. The date, actually at present we cannot say whether this Gazette will be extended or not, but as per the regulation of the Gazette, the last effective date of the Gazette notification that is effective for the importation of goods, where the BL dates comes on or before July 14. That is I think my answer.
Yeah. I think we answered on how the appeals can be made. And for letters of credit that are opened during this period, I think those requests can be made to the Import-Export Control Department, and individual approvals will be given for those. It's non-essential. And the value addition will be, they want to know if it is per shipment or is it for the company. No, value addition will be calculated for each shipment. That will be done by the Sri Lanka Customs under the TEEP scheme, as was mentioned. And there will be lesser procedure involved when goods are imported for purpose of re-export under the TEEP scheme. So that will function smoothly. I think the other questions that, although we have got several questions, most of these have been answered. Anything else that is not answered, we will certainly get back to you. So maybe with that, how an exporter could import raw material for export purposes, value addition, which manufactured out of banned material. Oh, okay. Yeah, the position with regard to some of the banned materials, how that can be imported. In addition to temporary suspended, there are a few items that have been banned. So I would like to request the Import-Export Control Department to respond how we could facilitate exporters the use of some of the banned raw materials which are required by companies in small quantities to be included in their export processing, such as turmeric, ginger. extracts that are required for exports. Maybe the Import-Export Control Department could respond to that. Extracts required for exports which are banned. If it is banned, how do we get over? If it is a banned item which is still required for export processing. Will we have to submit it?
And some agricultural items, I think according to the government policy that mention agricultural items have been banned. We can't allow to import such items at the moment.
At the moment, okay. So if it is, can they not make an appeal to the Tariff Determination Committee?
There are several appeals, but Trade Determination have refused the request because the Agricultural Department and Ministry of Plantation against that importation because due to local farmers, they are
okay.
I think they don't allow to import at that period.
Okay, during the ban period. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think the other questions that we have got, it's 85 in total, but whatever questions that have not been answered, EDB will take care to respond to those questions. So with that, with remaining only 2 minutes, I think we need to conclude this session. Let me formally thank all the participants for joining us, and also request them if they have any concerns to submit them to the respective organizations like the BOI, EDB, Ministry of Industries or Ministry of Agriculture, or the Controller, Import-Export Control Department, and we will still get back to you on those. And thank you, Madam Mrs. Damayanti Karunaratne, for spending your valuable time in the morning with us. I know what a busy schedule you have and the number of the visitors that may be awaiting you in your office. So Mrs. Damayanti Karunaratne, thank you for agreeing to join us and also partly jointly assisting us to organize this, assisted by Mr. Ranjit Vimalasuriya, the controller, and Mr. Kasun Fernando, the assistant director. Must also thank the Director General of the Sri Lanka Customs for nominating 2 senior officials, Mr. Gamini Jayawardena and Mr. Tilak Amaraperuma Arachi, Deputy Director of Customs, and for the valuable explanations given to us clearly from the part of the Sri Lanka Customs with regard to these import-export due to this new gazette. And finally, the Board of Investment of Sri Lanka, which is our sister organization, for joining us and giving valuable inputs to the exporters. Last but not least, I must also thank my own officials, Mr. Indrakirti, our Director Trade Facilitation and Information. As the name goes, his mandate is to facilitate the exporters and facilitate and give information. So as part of the our giving out information at the request of Mr. Prabhash Subhasinghe, our chairman, he was very keen that we start a series, a webinar series, and have a weekly webinars to disseminate as much as information we could for the benefit of the exporters. So it is on his directive that we organize this, and it was this task is given to the our Director Trade Facilitation and assisted by our IT division. Thank you very much. for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.